They thought they had only scared a black boy and hurt his dog, but before the night was over, every step they took would become a trail his mother knew how to follow. Caleb Turner was 12 years old, small for his age, with a backpack hanging from one shoulder and one hand wrapped around the leash of Ranger, the retired K-9 who walked beside him like a shadow with a heartbeat. The alley behind Patel's grocery was only 2 blocks from home, but when Derek Malloy and his crew stepped out from beside an old brick wall, the whole street seemed to shrink. Derek smiled like fear belonged to him. Troy lifted his phone to record. Luis leaned against a rusted fence, laughing before anything was funny. Kenny kicked a crushed soda can across the concrete and said, "Look at him, walking that old police dog like somebody is scared." Caleb tightened his grip on the leash. "I am just going home." Ranger moved first, not charging, not barking wildly, just stepping in front of the boy with his chest steady and his eyes locked on Derek. That quiet courage made Derek's smile disappear. He was used to children lowering their heads. He was used to neighbors closing blinds. He was not used to a dog standing between him and the boy he wanted to humiliate. "Move your mutt," Derek said. Caleb shook his head. "Please, just let us pass." Troy laughed into his phone. He said please. Derek stepped closer, close enough for Ranger to growl low, the sound controlled and warning, not violent. The old K-9 vest on Ranger's back was faded, the stitching repaired, the name patch worn from years of use, but Caleb trusted it more than any streetlight in the neighborhood. Derek saw that trust and decided to break it. He reached toward the leash, jerking it hard enough to pull Ranger off balance. Caleb cried out and dropped his backpack. Ranger stumbled, recovered, and placed himself in front of Caleb again, but this time his breathing changed. His harness had shifted awkwardly, and one front leg lifted just slightly from the wet concrete. There was no blood, no wild noise, only the terrible sight of a loyal dog trying to protect a boy while clearly hurting. Caleb fell to his knees beside him. "Ranger, stay with me. Please stay with me." Derek laughed, trying to make the others laugh too, but the sound came out thinner than before. "That dog is not so tough now." Caleb looked up with tears in his eyes. "Why would you do that?" Derek leaned down just enough to make the boy feel small. "Because nobody is coming for you." That was his mistake. Caleb's shaking hand reached into his pocket and called his mother. When Marissa Turner answered, Caleb could barely speak. "Mom, Ranger is hurt." There was 1 second of silence on the line, but it was not panic. It was control. Her voice came through low and steady. "Where are you?" "Behind Mr. Patel's store." "Stay with Ranger. Do not touch anything they dropped. Do not argue." "I am coming." Derek smirked when he heard the word mom. "Go ahead. Call her." "What is she going to do?" Caleb did not answer. Ranger's collar gave a tiny electronic blink, sending a distress ping to Marissa's phone without the thugs noticing. Troy's camera was still recording their faces, their voices, the alley wall, the old Dodge Charger at the curb, and the partial license plate reflecting in a puddle. Above the grocery store back door, a dusty security camera pointed down at the alley, its red light faint but awake. Derek saw only a scared child and an injured dog. He did not see the evidence gathering around him. He did not know that Ranger had been trained to remember scent better than men remembered lies. And he did not know that the quiet mother driving toward that alley had once trained war dogs for a secret agency that found people who thought they could disappear. 3 hours before Caleb Turner knelt on wet concrete with Ranger's leash shaking in his hands, the morning had begun in the quiet, ordinary way that made their home feel safe. Their small house sat on a tree-lined street in a working-class neighborhood outside Laurel, Maryland, with a narrow porch, a patch of grass that Ranger treated like his post, and a wind chime near the front door that moved whenever traffic pushed air down the block. Caleb was 12, African-American, thoughtful, and gentle in the way boys become when they have learned to listen before speaking. He woke before his alarm because Ranger's nose touched the edge of his blanket at 6:25, the same time every school day. I know, Caleb whispered, smiling before his eyes were fully open. Breakfast first, patrol second. Ranger gave one soft huff and stepped back, his old K9 vest folded neatly over the chair near Caleb's desk. The vest was faded, the stitching repaired by Marissa's careful hands, but Caleb never treated it like a costume. To him, it was proof that Ranger had lived a life of purpose before becoming his best friend. In the kitchen, Marissa Turner was already awake, standing at the stove in a dark blue work shirt from the Animal Rehabilitation Center, black jeans, and practical boots. She was 43, African American, with warm brown skin, steady eyes, and the kind of calm face that made people lower their voices without knowing why. Her hair was pulled back, simple and neat, and her movements were quiet but precise. She set Caleb's oatmeal on the table, checked Ranger's water bowl, glanced through the front window, and noticed a delivery truck parked half a block farther than usual. Nothing in her expression changed, but she noticed. Marissa always noticed. Caleb slid into his chair and opened his math worksheet beside his bowl. Ranger wants eggs. Ranger wants whatever your plate has, Marissa said, placing a measured portion of food into Ranger's dish. And Ranger already has breakfast designed for his joints. Caleb grinned. He says that sounds boring. He says discipline keeps old knees working. Ranger looked up at her voice, ears shifting, and Caleb laughed because the dog seemed to understand every word. Their mornings were built on small routines. Caleb packed his books, Ranger carried a soft training dummy from the hallway to the kitchen, Marissa checked the dog's paws, then Caleb read 5 vocabulary words out loud while Ranger sat as if attending class. There was nothing dangerous about it, nothing dramatic, nothing that looked like the beginning of a story that would reach federal task force files by nightfall. They were just a mother, a boy, and an old K9 trying to live peacefully in a neighborhood where peace sometimes had to be protected quietly. Marissa worked at Green Hollow Animal Rehabilitation Center, a low brick building 12 miles away where retired service animals, injured working dogs, and anxious rescue dogs learned how to trust their bodies again. The staff knew she was gifted with difficult animals. They knew dogs that snapped at other handlers settled when she entered the room. They knew she could read a limp from across a kennel, hear stress in a breathing pattern, and correct a leash grip with one sentence. They did not know why. Marissa did not offer stories about her past. She did not talk about the years before Caleb, before Maryland, before she chose civilian life and the quiet name tag that said rehabilitation specialist instead of anything classified or official. When co-workers asked how she knew so much about K9 behavior, she smiled gently and said, "Experience teaches you if you respect it." That was all. At home, the hints were small enough for Caleb to grow up around them without fully understanding. A locked gray metal trunk sat on a high shelf in the garage beneath an old tarp. Caleb had seen it only twice when Marissa moved boxes during spring cleaning. It had no labels, only 3 faded scratches near the handle and a combination lock with numbers worn smooth by years of use. In the laundry room drawer, beside batteries and spare keys, there was a slim metal whistle that looked ordinary until Ranger heard it. Marissa never blew it loudly. She barely breathed through it, and Ranger would stop instantly, eyes focused, body still, waiting for a command Caleb had never heard from any neighborhood dog owner. In a small envelope tucked behind family documents, there were old fabric patches with the logos removed, a photograph of Marissa in 10 field gear standing beside 3 powerful working dogs, and a silver coin with no agency name, only a paw print pressed over a compass. Caleb had asked once if she had been in the army. Marissa had closed the envelope and said, "I worked with dogs that had important jobs." Like Ranger? A little like Ranger, she said. But Ranger's most important job now is walking you home. Caleb accepted. That because he trusted her, and because Ranger made every sidewalk feel less lonely. At school, Caleb was not the loudest kid or the fastest on the playground. He liked science, sketching dogs in the margins of his notebooks, and helping his teacher carry bins after class. Some kids teased him for being quiet. Some called Ranger his bodyguard when they saw them together after school. Caleb never tried to act tougher than he was. Marissa had taught him that courage did not always look like pushing back. Sometimes courage looked like keeping your voice steady, knowing when to leave, and remembering details if something went wrong. Your eyes are not just for fear, she told him often. They are for facts. That afternoon, those words would matter more than either of them knew. Before Caleb left for school, Marissa adjusted Ranger's collar and checked the small GPS tag clipped beneath the nameplate. Caleb rolled his eyes. "Mom, you check that every day." "And every day it works because I check it. Nobody is going to mess with us." Marissa looked at him for a second longer than usual. She wanted to believe that. She also knew the world did not become safe because children deserved it. "You take the main sidewalk home," she said. "If Mr. Patel has the back gate open, you do not cut through unless Ranger is relaxed and the alley is clear." Caleb sighed. "I know. Tell me. Main sidewalk first. Check the alley. Do not argue with grown people. If something feels wrong, call you. If Ranger reacts, trust him." Marissa nodded. "Good." Ranger stepped forward and pressed his head lightly against Caleb's leg. Caleb bent down and hugged him around the neck. "See you after school, partner." Ranger's tail moved once, slow and loyal. Marissa watched from the porch as Caleb walked to the bus stop, backpack bouncing, lunch bag in hand, unaware of the blue sedan idling near the far curb until she saw it pull away. It was probably nothing. Most things were nothing. But Marissa wrote the partial plate in the margin of a grocery receipt before leaving for work. At Green Hollow that day, she spent the morning helping a nervous Belgian Malinois learn to climb stairs again after surgery. She spoke softly, never rushing the dog, rewarding each careful step. A younger technician asked how she stayed so calm when animals panicked. Marissa tightened a support strap around the dog's harness and answered, "Panic gives fear a leader. Calm gives it a way out." The technician smiled, thinking it was just a good line. Marissa knew it was survival. By mid-afternoon, she drove home, changed out of her work shirt, and prepared Ranger's evening supplement. Caleb usually reached Patel's grocery by 3:45, bought a bottle of lemonade if he had saved enough lunch money, and walked home with Ranger after Marissa released him from the yard. Ranger knew the schedule. At 3:38, he stood by the front door. At 3:42, he looked at Marissa. At 3:45, his ears lifted toward the direction of the grocery store. Marissa clipped on the leash and handed it to Caleb when he came through the gate, smiling, safe, ordinary. That was how it was supposed to be. She watched them start down the sidewalk together, Caleb talking to Ranger about a science project, Ranger walking on his left with measured patience. Nothing in their posture invited trouble. Nothing about them challenged anyone. A boy was walking home with the dog he loved. A mother was letting him practice independence within 2 safe blocks. But in the garage behind her, the locked trunk remained where it had always been. In her phone, Agent Laura Kim's old number still sat under a name Caleb did not recognize. In Ranger's collar, the GPS tag blinked quietly against his fur. And in Marissa Turner's eyes, there was a discipline the neighborhood had never needed to understand until the wrong men decided that her quiet life meant she had no power left. Derek Malloy did not own the block, but he had spent 3 years teaching people to act as if he did. At 24, he was old enough to know better and young enough to still mistake fear for respect. People called him D-Mac because he liked names that sounded bigger than the life behind them. He lived 2 neighborhoods away, drove an old black Dodge Charger with mismatched rims, and spent most afternoons around the abandoned car wash near Route 1 with Troy Vance, Luis Ortega, and Kenny Blake. None of them had real power, but they had learned how much damage small power could do when good people were tired, busy, or afraid. They did not run a city. They did not control the police. They did not own stores or apartment buildings or street corners in any legal sense. What they owned was hesitation. They owned the half-second when a shopkeeper decided not to call again because the last report went nowhere. They owned the moment when a neighbor lowered the blinds instead of recording. They owned the silence after a child came home without lunch money and said nothing happened because saying something felt more dangerous than staying quiet. That was the kind of power Derek understood. It was not real authority. It was borrowed fear, and he wore it like a crown. Patel's grocery sat near the edge of that fear. It was a family store with a faded red awning, a narrow parking lot, and a back alley that connected two residential streets. Mr. Arjun Patel had installed cameras twice in 5 years. The first set stopped working after someone covered the lens with black spray paint. The second set was pointed too high after someone knocked the bracket loose with a basketball and laughed about it for a week. Derek never admitted anything, but he always seemed to know which camera was blind and which neighbor was too frightened to testify. He and his crew took packages off porches, leaned against cars that did not belong to them, blocked sidewalks, and made jokes that sounded harmless until the person hearing them tried to walk away. If a teenager had new sneakers, Troy wanted to see them. If a delivery driver told them to move, Luis asked whether he wanted trouble. If an older woman crossed the street to avoid them, Kenny laughed loudly enough to make sure she knew they noticed. Derek rarely had to do much. He had built a reputation from suggestions, not strength. A step too close. A phone held up like a threat. A hand resting on someone's bike seat. A smile that said everyone knew how this worked. Local police had heard his name, but names were not cases. Reports came in thin and frightened. Package missing, possible group near address. Verbal threat, no witness willing to sign. Camera damaged, no clear suspect. Youths loitering, left before officers arrived. Derek understood the space between what people knew and what they could prove, and he lived comfortably inside it. His friends admired that about him. Troy Vance, 22, was the one with the phone always in his hand, recording everything except the parts that made them look guilty. He liked posting short clips with laughing captions and music over them, turning intimidation into entertainment for people who never saw the faces of the kids on the other side. Luis Ortega, 23, had a quick temper and slower judgment. He repeated whatever Derek said, then pushed it a little farther so Derek could pretend he was the reasonable one. Kenny Blake was 19, the youngest, still trying to earn approval by laughing first and loudest. Together, they made a small crowd feel larger than it was. That was another trick Derek understood. For men standing in the wrong place at the right time could make a sidewalk feel like a locked door. The neighborhood had adjusted around them in the sad way neighborhoods sometimes do. Children changed routes after school. Parents texted each other warnings. Mr. Patel took trash out before dark. A retired bus driver named Mrs. Henson stopped sitting on her porch after Derek joked that her doorbell camera made her look nosy. Nobody called it surrender. They called it being careful. Derek called it respect. But the one thing on that block that had ever made him feel small was Ranger. The first time Derek noticed the dog, Caleb Turner was walking home from school with Ranger at his left side, the old K9 vest fitted across the dog's back. Derek had been standing near the grocery store with Troy and Luis, laughing at a delivery driver who had dropped a box while trying to avoid them. Caleb had slowed, eyes down, hoping to pass quietly. Derek stepped into his path because that was what he did when someone looked easy to move. Before Caleb could speak, Ranger shifted forward. Not wild. Not loud. Not out of control. Just one measured step between Derek and the boy, ears alert, body steady, eyes fixed on the man blocking the sidewalk. The growl that followed was low, disciplined, and brief. It did not sound like a pet losing control. It sounded like a warning from an animal that had been taught exactly how long a warning should be. Derek froze for half a second. Troy saw it. Luis saw it. Caleb saw it too, though he looked away quickly. Derek recovered by laughing and saying, "Better keep that old dog on a leash." But the damage had already happened. For 1 second, the crew had seen Derek hesitate because of a boy's dog, and Derek hated anything that made him look less untouchable. After that, Ranger became more than a dog in Derek's mind. He became a symbol of a challenge Derek had not answered. Whenever Caleb passed with Ranger, Derek watched. He mocked the vest. He called Ranger old. He asked Caleb whether his mother needed a police dog because she was scared of the block. Caleb never responded the way Derek wanted. He kept walking, one hand on the leash, trusting Ranger, trusting the rules Marissa had taught him. Do not argue. Do not perform fear. Remember details. Leave clean. That made Derek angrier than backtalk would have. A scared kid who stayed calm made him feel like his power was not landing. A dog that guarded without attacking made him feel like his usual tricks had limits. And limits were the one thing Derek refused to accept. The week before everything changed, Derek's confidence had been fed by another escape. Mrs. Henson's grandson had tried to report Troy for taking a package from the porch. The doorbell camera caught a blurry figure in a gray hoodie, but not enough for a charge. Derek laughed about it outside the car wash that night, telling the crew, "See? People talk, but nobody proves anything." That sentence became his philosophy. Nobody proves anything. He repeated it after Mr. Patel complained about graffiti on the side wall. He repeated it after a delivery driver accused Luis of blocking his truck. He repeated it when Caleb and Ranger walked by and Caleb kept his eyes forward. Nobody proves anything, Derek said, loud enough for the boy to hear. Ranger's ears shifted, but he stayed steady. Caleb's grip tightened, but he kept walking. Derek watched the dog's vest disappear around the corner and felt the old irritation return. That kid thinks the dog makes him special, Troy said, filming the Charger's hood for no reason except habit. Derek leaned back against the car. No. His mother thinks that dog makes him safe. Kenny laughed. She is the quiet lady from Green Hollow, right? Works with rescue dogs. Luis said, I have seen her. She does not even look at anybody. Derek smiled. Exactly. To him, quiet meant weak. A woman who did not yell, did not threaten, did not step into the street demanding respect must have none. He had seen Marissa Turner only a handful of times, carrying groceries, fixing the porch latch, walking Ranger late in the evening with a posture too calm to be fear and too controlled for Derek to understand. She never stared at them. She never rushed Caleb. She never acted impressed by the noise they made. Derek decided that was because she was careful. He did not consider that it might be because she was measuring them. He had no idea that the woman he dismissed as a soft-spoken dog rehab worker could read a handler's grip from 50 yards away, identify stress in a dog's breathing before most people noticed a limp, and preserve a trail better than local officers who had never worked a canine scene. He only knew she was quiet. And men like Derek often confuse quiet people with people who have no answer. The afternoon he chose Caleb, Derek had already been irritated. Mr. Patel had refused to let Troy hang around inside the store after complaints from customers. A neighbor had installed a new camera above a garage. A patrol car had passed the abandoned car wash twice that week. None of it was serious enough to scare him, but all of it felt like the block was forgetting who made people lower their voices. Then he saw Caleb leaving school early enough to pass Patel's grocery before the after-work traffic picked up, Ranger beside him, old vest catching the gray light. Derek noticed the boy's backpack, the careful way he avoided the cracked part of the sidewalk, the way Ranger stayed close without being pulled. He saw trust, and because trust was something he did not know how to build, he wanted to make it look foolish. Troy was already holding his phone. Luis pushed away from the wall. Kenny grinned because he could feel Derek choosing a target. There he is, Troy said. Little K-9 officer. Derek looked toward the grocery store camera. The bracket still pointed slightly high, or so he thought. He looked toward the alley. No adults. No patrol car. No Marissa. Just a boy, a dog, and a stretch of wet concrete behind the store. In Derek's mind, it was a perfect place for a small lesson. Not a lesson that would bring heavy charges. Not something he thought would matter beyond the block. Just enough to remind a child, a dog, and a quiet mother that fear still had his name on it. That was how small men with borrowed power think. They believe the world ends at the edge of their own reputation. They believe a camera they cannot see clearly is not recording. They believe a child's silence means no one taught him what to remember. They believe a dog's old vest is decoration. Most of all, they believe a mother who stays calm must not have teeth. Derek stepped from the wall before Caleb reached the alley mouth, wearing the same smile neighbors had learned to avoid. Troy lifted the phone higher. Luis and Kenny spread out just enough to make the path feel closed. Caleb slowed, and Ranger's head rose. The dog recognized scent before the boy recognized danger. Derek saw Ranger's focus and felt that old sting of embarrassment from the first warning growl. This time, he promised himself, the dog would not be the reason he backed up. This time, the block would see who moved and who got moved. He did not know that Mr. Patel had adjusted the rear camera that morning after his nephew climbed a ladder before school. He did not know Mrs. Henson's new doorbell camera caught the far end of the alley. He did not know Troy's habit of recording would become a gift to investigators. He did not know Ranger's collar carried a GPS distress function Marissa checked every day. And he did not know that the quiet woman he had mocked from a distance had once spent years training dogs to follow men through worse places than an alley behind a grocery store. Derek only saw a black boy he thought he could scare, a dog he thought he could shame, and a mother he thought would cry at home and do nothing. That blindness was the foundation of every mistake he was about to make. Caleb Turner knew something was wrong before Derek Malloy said a word, because Ranger knew it first. The old K9's pace changed at the mouth of the alley behind Patel's grocery, not enough for most people to notice, but enough for Caleb to feel the leash grow still in his hand. Ranger did not pull. He did not bark. He simply stopped with one front paw on the damp concrete and lifted his head toward the brick wall where the afternoon shadows gathered. Caleb remembered his mother's rule, if Ranger reacts, trust him. He looked past the dumpster, past the stack of empty milk crates, and saw Derek step into the alley with that easy smile people used when they wanted fear to look like a joke. Troy Vance came after him with his phone already raised. Luis Ortega leaned against the wall near the old service door, and Kenny Blake drifted behind Caleb just enough to make the way back feel narrower. The grocery store's rear camera sat above the door, dusty but aimed lower than Derek thought. A shallow puddle near the curb reflected the side of Derek's black Dodge Charger, including part of the license plate. Caleb noticed it because Marissa had taught him to notice things without staring. "Where you going, little man?" Derek asked. Caleb swallowed, then kept his voice polite. "Home." Ranger stepped half a pace in front of him. The leash remained loose, but Caleb's fingers tightened around it. Derek looked down at the faded K9 vest and laughed. "You still walking around with that old police dog like he is somebody?" Troy chuckled behind his phone. "That vest older than my uncle's couch." Luis nodded toward Caleb's backpack. "What you got in there?" "Homework and dog treats." Kenny laughed too loudly, trying to make himself sound bigger than he was. Caleb did not answer the jokes. He looked at the open sidewalk beyond them and said, "Can we pass, please?" The please bothered Derek more than fear would have. It was not weak enough. It was controlled, like Caleb was following instructions instead of begging. Derek stepped closer, and Ranger's body shifted again, quiet and exact, putting himself between Derek and the boy. A low warning sound rose from his chest, brief and disciplined. Caleb touched two fingers lightly against the leash clip. "Ranger, steady." Ranger obeyed immediately, eyes fixed on Derek, body still. That obedience made Derek's expression change. He had wanted a messy reaction, something wild he could mock or blame. Instead, the dog showed control, and that made the crew look less powerful. Derek looked at Troy's phone, then back at Caleb. "You hear that?" He got commands. Troy zoomed in. "Say it again, kid. Make him do tricks." Caleb shook his head. "He is not a trick dog." "No." Derek tilted his head. "Then what is he?" "Your daddy." The words hit Caleb hard enough that his face changed before he could stop it. His father had not been in the house for years, and Derek somehow found the softest place to press without knowing anything about him. Ranger sensed the shift and moved his shoulder closer to Caleb's knee. Caleb took one breath, then another, repeating Marissa's voice inside his head. "Do not argue with grown people. Leave clean. Remember details. Please move," Caleb said. "My mom is waiting." Derek smiled wider. "Your mom? The quiet lady who fixes dogs?" Luis laughed. "She going to come out here with a little whistle?" Caleb's eyes flicked once to Derek's shoes, then Troy's phone, then the tear in Luis's jacket sleeve near the cuff, then the gray hoodie tied around Kenny's waist. Facts. Not fear. That was what Marissa had taught him. Derek saw Caleb's eyes moving and misread it as defiance. "What you looking at?" "Nothing." "No, you were looking like you want to remember something." Caleb said nothing. Ranger gave another low warning, still controlled. Derek pointed at the dog. "Tell him to stop that. He is standing still." "I said tell him." Caleb kept his voice quiet. "Ranger, easy." Ranger's ears shifted, but he stayed ready. Derek hated how the dog obeyed Caleb more than the crew obeyed him. It made the boy look protected, and Derek had chosen this alley to prove the boy was not. He stepped to the side, pretending he would let them pass, then blocked Caleb again when Caleb moved. Troy laughed into the phone. "Look at him. He thought he was free." Caleb stopped instantly. He did not push through. He did not insult them. He did not raise his voice. That restraint stole the reaction Derek wanted, and it made him meaner. "You think you are better than us because you got a trained dog?" Caleb looked down at Ranger's vest. "No, you think this dog makes you safe?" Caleb's hand rested gently on Ranger's back. "I think he wants to go home." For a second, something like embarrassment flashed across Derek's face because the answer was too simple for the cruelty he had prepared. Around them, the alley held details that would matter later: Troy's phone recording in vertical video, the grocery camera catching the group from above, a receipt dropped near Kenny's shoe, Derek's charger reflected in water, Ranger's GPS collar blinking faintly under his fur. Derek saw none of it. He saw only a black boy refusing to fold the way he expected. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "This block is not your little dog park. You do not walk through here like you own it." Caleb answered, "We do not own it. We are just walking home." "Then walk around. This is the way home." "Not today." Ranger's nose twitched. He took in Derek's scent, the rubber sole of his shoe, the cheap cologne on his jacket, the faint oil smell from the charger, the cotton fiber from the torn hoodie sleeve. A trained dog does not need a confession when the world leaves scent everywhere. Caleb did not know all of that, but he knew Ranger was memorizing something. Derek reached toward the old vest, not touching yet, just close enough to make Caleb step back. Ranger shifted between them again, calm but firm. Caleb's voice trembled this time, but he kept it respectful. "Do not touch him." Troy laughed. He said do not touch him. Derek looked at the phone and performed for it. "What happens if I do?" Caleb's eyes filled with fear, but he did not move the leash in a way that would make Ranger lunge. "Please. He is retired." That word made Luis laugh. "Retired? Dog got a pension?" Kenny added, "Maybe he got a badge too." Derek's smile came back, crueler now because the crew was laughing again. Retired means useless. Caleb's face tightened. Ranger's ears flicked, but he held position. He is not useless, Caleb said. It was the first sentence with real feeling in it, and Derek seized on it immediately. There it is, Derek said. That is the attitude. I did not mean anything. You meant enough. Caleb glanced toward the grocery store door, hoping Mr. Patel might come out. The door stayed closed, though a shadow moved behind the frosted glass. Derek noticed Caleb looking and turned his head. Nobody is coming out for you. Caleb said nothing, but inside his pocket his phone was there. Marissa was one call away. He did not call yet because he still believed if he stayed calm, they might get bored and leave. That was what children often hope when adults choose cruelty. They hope the cruelty will run out by itself. Derek stepped close enough that Ranger's chest nearly touched his leg. Ranger did not bite. He did not jump. He simply stood, a living wall between a boy and a man who wanted to feel large. Derek looked down and felt that old humiliation from the first warning growl return. He had planned to scare Caleb. Instead, the dog had made him pause again in front of his crew. Troy's phone was recording. Luis was watching. Kenny was waiting for Derek to prove he still controlled the moment. Caleb saw the change in Derek's eyes and felt cold move through him. This was no longer only teasing. Derek was deciding whether to make the scene bigger because a boy and a dog had not bowed fast enough. Caleb tightened his grip and whispered, "Ranger, stay." Ranger stayed. Derek heard the command, saw the obedience, and mistook both for a challenge. "You know what?" he said, stepping back with a laugh that sounded forced. "Maybe that dog needs to learn this block does not take orders from you." Caleb shook his head quickly. "We are leaving. Please. We will go around." But Derek moved in front of the path again, and Troy angled the phone closer. "Too late now," Derek said. The first insult had failed to break the boy. The first threat had failed to move the dog. And because Derek could not stand being ignored by courage quieter than his own cruelty, he chose to escalate. Derek Malloy escalated because Caleb Turner had not given him the one thing he wanted most, a clean picture of fear. Caleb was scared, of course he was scared, but Marissa had taught him that fear did not have to steer his hands, his voice, or Ranger's leash. So he stood in the damp alley behind Patel's grocery with his backpack slipping from one shoulder, Ranger positioned in front of him, and 4 older boys blocking the way home, trying to keep his breathing steady enough that Ranger would not feel panic travel down the leash. Derek saw that control and hated it. "Too late now," he repeated, looking toward Troy's phone as if the camera made him bigger. "You wanted to walk through here with your little hero dog, so let us see what kind of hero he is." Caleb shook his head. "We are not bothering anybody." "You are bothering me," Derek said. "Walking around like the block owes you a sidewalk." Luis laughed and kicked lightly at Caleb's backpack where it had dropped near the wall, sending it sliding across the wet concrete until the zipper scraped against a broken bottle cap. Caleb flinched but did not chase it. Ranger's head turned for half a second, tracking the movement, then returned to Derek. Troy zoomed in on Caleb's face. "Look at him trying not to cry." Kenny picked up the backpack by one strap and held it away from Caleb. "What you got in here, little man?" "Dog snacks. Police badge. A note from your mommy." Caleb's voice trembled, but he kept it respectful. "Please give it back." "Please give it back," Kenny mocked, making his voice high and childish. Troy laughed louder for the video. Derek watched Caleb's eyes move to the backpack, then to Ranger, then to the grocery store door. "You keep looking for help," Derek said. "Nobody is coming. Mr. Patel minds his business now. Your neighbors mind theirs. That is how smart people stay smart." Behind the frosted glass of the grocery back door, a shadow shifted. Mr. Patel was there, phone in hand, afraid but watching. Derek did not know that the camera above the door had been adjusted that morning. He did not know that the microphone on Troy's phone was catching his voice clearly. He only knew that Caleb still had not bowed his head enough. Derek stepped toward the dog again. Ranger did not lunge. His body lowered slightly, controlled, protective, a trained barrier rather than a threat. Caleb whispered, "Ranger, easy." The command worked, and that made Derek's jaw tighten. "Stop telling him what to do." "He listens to me," Caleb said softly. Derek's eyes sharpened. "Yeah. Maybe that is the problem." He reached toward the old K9 vest with 2 fingers, not fully grabbing it yet, just flicking the edge of the worn fabric in a way meant to humiliate. Ranger shifted, and Caleb stepped closer to the dog's shoulder. "Do not touch his vest. You hear him?" Derek said to Troy. "He thinks the dog has rights." Caleb's cheeks burned. "He is retired. Then he should stay home." "We were going home." "Not fast enough." Louise kicked the backpack again, harder this time, and Caleb's science folder slid out onto the ground. Papers scattered across the wet concrete, homework pages soaking at the edges. Caleb's face broke for just a second. He had spent 2 nights on that project, drawing diagrams carefully while Ranger slept beside his chair. He took 1 step toward the papers, but Derek moved in front of him. "No, no. Stay there. I need my schoolwork. You need to learn who you walk past. I did not do anything to you." Derek leaned closer. "That is what makes it easy." The sentence landed coldly because there was no anger behind it, only cruelty looking for entertainment. Troy kept recording, laughing into the phone. "Say something for the camera, Caleb. Tell everybody your dog is going to save you." Caleb looked at the lens, then away. "Please stop recording me." "Public alley," Troy said. "We can record whatever we want." "You are recording yourselves," Caleb said before he could stop himself. It was a small sentence, quiet and factual, but Derek heard it like a challenge. His smile disappeared. "What did you say?" Caleb swallowed. "Nothing." "No. You said something smart." Ranger's ears moved back slightly, sensing Derek's change. The leash remained loose in Caleb's hand, but Caleb felt the dog gather himself. "Ranger, steady," Caleb whispered. Derek looked down at the collar. Beneath the nameplate, the small GPS tag gave a faint green blink. Derek noticed it for the first time and pointed. "What is that?" Caleb did not answer. "That's some kind of tracker." Louise stepped closer. "Rich dog got technology." Kenny laughed. "Maybe his mommy watches him like a baby." Caleb's hand moved protectively over the collar. "It is just for safety." Derek's smile returned, meaner than before. "Safety?" He looked around the alley, at the damp wall, the old crates, the empty service lane. "You feel safe right now?" Caleb did not answer, and his silence made Derek bolder. Derek reached suddenly, not at Caleb, but at the loose end of the leash near Ranger's collar. Caleb pulled back instinctively, and Ranger stepped sideways to keep himself between them. The movement was controlled, but Ranger's front paw slipped on the wet concrete. His harness twisted awkwardly against his shoulder, and he gave a low, pained breath that Caleb heard even through the laughter. Caleb dropped to one knee beside him. "Ranger? Ranger, look at me." Ranger stayed upright, still trying to shield the boy, but one leg lifted slightly. Caleb's voice cracked. "Please do not touch him. He is hurt." Derek looked at the dog, then at Troy's phone, and tried to turn the ugly moment into another joke. "That old dog is dramatic." Troy laughed, but weaker this time, because even he could see Ranger was not pretending. Louise looked away for half a second. Kenny stopped swinging the backpack. Caleb put a gentle hand on Ranger's chest, feeling the fast rhythm beneath the fur. Easy, boy. I am here. Ranger turned his head toward Caleb, eyes steady despite the pain, and pressed his body closer to block him again. That loyalty should have ended it. Anyone with a decent heart would have backed away then. But Derek had already felt the crew's attention shifting, already felt the possibility that he had gone too far and looked small doing it. So he chose to make himself louder. Pick your dog up and get out. Caleb looked up, tears in his eyes. You are blocking us. I said get out. He cannot walk fast. Not my problem. You hurt him. Derek's face hardened. Careful. Caleb froze. You are saying things you cannot prove. That sentence, more than anything else, revealed who Derek believed he was. He did not think truth mattered. He thought proof belonged to the people strong enough to control the story. He did not see the grocery camera. He did not see Mr. Patel now recording from behind the back door. He did not see the puddle holding the reflection of his charger. He did not understand that Troy's phone, still in the air, had captured his hand on the leash, the backpack being kicked, the dog slipping, Caleb pleading, and Derek saying nobody could prove anything. He believed the alley was his because it had been quiet for so long. Caleb reached slowly into his pocket. Derek snapped, "What are you doing?" "Calling my mom." The crew laughed again, but the laugh had an edge now. Derek spread his arms. "Go ahead. Call her. Tell her D-Mac said her dog needs to stay off my block." Caleb's thumb shook as he tapped Marissa's contact. Ranger leaned against him, breathing harder than usual but still alert, still watching Derek. The call rang once. Twice. Then Marissa answered. Caleb tried to speak calmly, but the words came out broken. "Mom, Ranger is hurt." Derek stepped closer, bending toward the phone. "Tell her you got scared by nothing." Caleb turned away slightly, shielding the phone with his shoulder. Marissa's voice came through low and steady, not loud enough for the crew to hear clearly. "Where are you?" "Behind Mr. Patel's store." "Is Ranger breathing clearly?" Caleb looked down. "Yes, but his leg is up and his harness twisted." "Do not move him more than you have to. Keep his head steady. Stay with him. They are still here." There was a pause, short and controlled. "Do not argue. Do not touch anything they dropped. Look at the ground around you and remember what you see." Caleb's eyes moved as she spoke, a torn piece of gray fabric near the milk crates, a black sneaker print in wet dust, the crushed soda can Kenny had kicked, his own homework pages near the gutter, the charger reflection in the puddle. "I see things," he whispered. "Good," Marissa said. "I am coming." Derek heard enough to laugh. "She is coming," he announced to the crew. Everybody act scared. Troy pointed the phone toward the street. "Quiet dog lady on the way." Louise said, "Maybe she will bring treats." Kenny tossed the backpack back toward Caleb, but it landed short, spilling 2 books beside the wet papers. Caleb did not move for them. Ranger mattered more. Derek noticed Caleb's attention staying on the dog and felt cheated out of the reaction he wanted. "Pick that up," he ordered. Caleb kept his hand on Ranger. "I cannot leave him." "Pick it up." No, it was barely above a whisper, but it was still no. Derek stepped forward. Ranger gave another low warning, weaker but present. Caleb quickly said, "Ranger, stay. Please stay." The dog obeyed, though his body trembled. Derek stared at him. A boy had told a hurt dog to stay, and the dog had listened better than Derek's own crew listened to him. That humiliation cut him deeper than any insult. "You think he is still tough?" Derek said. Caleb's face was wet now, but his voice steadied in a way that came from somewhere beyond fear. "He is good. Good dogs learn lessons. He already knows more than you. Troy's eyes widened behind the phone. Luis muttered, "Oh." Caleb looked shocked at himself, but the words were out. Derek stepped closer, and the crew's laughter stopped. He did not touch Caleb, but his presence pressed the air down. "Say that again." Caleb's breathing shook. Ranger tried to shift, and Caleb gently kept him still. "I just want to go home." Derek crouched slightly, looking Caleb in the eye. "Then remember this. Your mom cannot protect you. That dog cannot protect you. Nobody on this block is going to risk anything for you." From inside the grocery store, Mr. Patel's shadow moved again. At the far end of the alley, Mrs. Henson's new doorbell camera captured the Charger pulling slightly forward as Kenny hit the remote start by accident. The engine rumbled, and the partial plate became clearer in the puddle. Ranger's nose twitched toward the sound, storing scent and direction in a way no one there except Marissa would later understand. Caleb did not know the science, but he knew Ranger's eyes. The dog was hurting, yet still working. Still remembering. Still protecting. Derek stood and looked at Troy. "Post it later," he said. "Make sure people see the dog fall." Troy hesitated. "Maybe we should not post that part." Derek's head turned slowly. "You scared now?" "No, I am just saying, post it," Derek said. "People need to know that vest does not mean nothing here." That command became another piece of the case, though Derek could not see it yet. Troy's video would show intent. It would show the humiliation was not accidental. It would show the crew wanted the neighborhood to watch a child and his K9 be shamed. Luis picked up a small piece of gray fabric that had torn from his sleeve on the rough brick and then dropped it again without noticing. Kenny's shoe pressed into a damp patch of dust, leaving a clear tread mark. Derek stepped back toward the Charger, still smiling as if the scene belonged to him. "Tell your mom if she wants to talk, she knows where the car wash is." Caleb did not answer. He was listening to Ranger breathe. Derek pointed once more at the dog. "And next time, keep him on the other side of the block." Then the crew began to leave, not running, not hiding, walking with the careless confidence of people who had never been followed by consequences. Troy kept the phone up as they backed away, laughing at the image of Caleb kneeling beside Ranger, trying to make the pain look like comedy. Luis climbed into the passenger seat of the Charger. Kenny slammed the back door. Derek lingered beside the driver's side long enough to call out, "Nobody proves anything." Then the car pulled away, tires hissing over the wet street, leaving behind the smell of oil, cheap cologne, rubber, and arrogance. Caleb waited until the Charger turned the corner before he let himself lean closer to Ranger. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." Ranger touched his nose to Caleb's sleeve, still trying to comfort the boy he had been protecting. That almost broke Caleb more than the fear had. He looked at the scattered homework, the backpack, the torn fabric near the crates, the puddle where the plate reflection had been, and the little green blink on Ranger's collar. His mother had told him not to touch anything they dropped, so he did not. He pulled off his jacket and placed it gently near Ranger's side without forcing him to move. The grocery back door opened a few inches, and Mr. Patel stepped out, phone in one hand, face pale with guilt. "Caleb," he said softly, "I called your mother too. I saved the camera." Caleb nodded, unable to speak. Mr. Patel looked at Ranger and swallowed hard. "I am sorry I did not come out sooner." Caleb did not blame him. Fear had ruled the block longer than one afternoon. But something had changed. The thugs had come to create silence. Instead, they had made witnesses. Troy had recorded. Mr. Patel had saved footage. The GPS collar had sent a distress ping. The alley camera had caught the angle. Mrs. Henson's doorbell camera had seen the car. The torn fabric remained on the ground. The shoe print waited in wet dust. Ranger's memory held scent that no lie could wash away. Minutes later, Marissa Turner's car stopped at the mouth of the alley. She stepped out without slamming the door, without shouting, without the panic Derek would have expected from a mother. Her eyes went first to Caleb, then to Ranger, then to the ground, then to the camera above Patel's door, then to the faint tire marks near the curb. She took in the whole scene in one sweep, and the softness on her face did not disappear, but something beneath it became steel. Caleb looked up at her. "Mom, they hurt him." Marissa knelt beside Ranger, her hands steady, her voice low enough that only her son and the dog could hear. "I see him, baby. You did right." Caleb shook his head, crying harder now that she was there. "I could not stop them." Marissa placed one hand on his shoulder. "Your job was to stay alive, keep Ranger calm, and remember. You did all three." Ranger lifted his head at the sound of her voice. Marissa checked his breathing, then the harness, then the lifted paw, every motion precise and gentle. She reached into her pocket and gave one soft coated whistle, so quiet Mr. Patel barely heard it. Ranger's eyes focused immediately. "Even injured, even tired," he responded. Marissa's expression changed for the smallest moment, not into anger, but recognition. The old training was still there. The trail was still there. Derek and his crew had left laughing because they believed cruelty was complete when the victim looked small. They did not understand that every cruel laugh, every false claim, every careless step, every frame of video, every scent on wet concrete had just become evidence. Marissa looked toward the street where the charger had vanished and spoke softly, almost to herself. "They left a trail." Caleb wiped his face. "Can Ranger find them?" Marissa looked at her son, then at the dog who had stood between him and fear. Ranger already started. Marissa Turner did not rush into the alley like someone who needed anger to prove love. She moved like someone who understood that panic could ruin a trail, frighten an injured dog, and give cruel men more power than they deserved. The moment she knelt beside Ranger, the world around Caleb seemed to slow. Her hands were gentle but exact, one palm near Ranger's chest, two fingers checking the rhythm of his breathing, her eyes moving from his lifted leg to the shifted harness to the angle of his shoulders. "Do not move him yet," she said softly. Caleb wiped his face with his sleeve, trying to stop shaking. "Is he going to be okay?" Marissa looked at Ranger before answering, because she had never believed in promising comfort before checking facts. Ranger's eyes stayed on her, tired but focused. "He is alert. He is breathing. He knows us. That is good." She loosened the harness just enough to take pressure off his shoulder without changing his position. "We are taking him to Dr. Ellis. But first, we keep this scene clean." Mr. Patel stood a few feet away near the grocery back door, guilt written across his face. "I saved the camera footage, Marissa. I should have come out sooner." She did not look at him with blame. "You opened the door. You saved the video. That matters." Then her eyes shifted to the ground with a precision that made Caleb suddenly understand she was seeing more than a mother should have been able to see in a few seconds. The torn gray fabric near the milk crates. The shoe print in wet dust. The direction of the tire marks. The crushed soda can. The scattered homework pages. The place where Ranger's paw had slipped. The angle of the grocery camera. The puddle where Caleb had seen the charger's plate reflected before the car left. Marissa took a small roll of evidence tape from the emergency pouch in her car, but she did not make a show of it. She marked the ground around the fabric without touching it, then photographed it from several angles with her phone. Caleb stared. "Mom, why do you have that?" "Because animals cannot explain what happened to them," she said. "So people who care have to preserve what can." It sounded like something from her work at the rehabilitation center, but the way she said it carried a deeper history. Mr. Patel watched her photograph the shoe print beside a quarter for scale. "You know how to do all this?" Marissa looked up once, calm and unreadable. "I know enough not to let them write the story first." Caleb heard that sentence and remembered other small things he had never connected: the locked gray trunk in the garage, the old whistle in the drawer, the way Ranger obeyed commands Caleb had never learned, the way his mother noticed cars, exits, shoes, voices, and camera angles without seeming to notice anything at all. Marissa reached into her pocket and took out the slim metal whistle. She did not blow it loudly. She barely shaped breath through it, one short note and a second note lower than the first. Ranger's ears lifted. His eyes sharpened through the pain. He stopped trembling and fixed his attention on her hand. "Good," Marissa whispered. "Hold." Caleb looked from the whistle to Ranger. "He still remembers that. Training does not leave just because the job changes." She said it about Ranger, but something in her voice made Caleb wonder if she was also speaking about herself. She used a folded towel from her car to support Ranger's leg, then asked Caleb to sit close enough for Ranger to smell him but not close enough to crowd him. "Keep your voice low. Tell him something ordinary." Caleb swallowed. "Ranger, when we get home, I am giving you the blue blanket. Not the red one. The blue one is better." Ranger's tail moved once, faint but real. Marissa's eyes softened for a moment, then became focused again. She called Dr. Ellis at Green Hollow Animal Rehabilitation Center and gave a report so precise it sounded nothing like a panicked parent. "Retired K9, male, responsive, possible shoulder strain or soft tissue injury, breathing stable, no visible severe trauma, transport needed with minimal movement. Prepare exam room 2 and document all findings for legal record." Caleb looked up. "Legal record?" Marissa ended the call and put the phone away. When someone hurts what you love and then says nobody can prove anything, you prove it correctly. She did not say she would make them pay. She did not say she would find them. She did not say any of the things Derek would have expected from an angry mother. That was what made her frightening in a way Caleb could not yet name. Her calm was not softness. It was training. While they waited for the support board from Dr. Ellis, Marissa asked Caleb to tell her everything, but only once, slowly. "Start from when Ranger stopped." Caleb described the alley, Derek stepping out, Troy recording, Luis by the wall, Kenny behind him, the jokes about the vest, the backpack, the leash, the slip, the charger, the phrase "nobody proves anything." Marissa did not interrupt except to ask for exact words. "Did Derek touch the collar or the leash?" "The leash." "Which hand?" Caleb closed his eyes, picturing it. "Right hand." "Any rings?" "No." But his sleeve had a tear. "Gray fabric." Marissa's eyes moved to the piece near the crates. "Good memory." "I was scared." Scared people can still remember facts. Mr. Patel returned with a printed note from his camera system showing the time range of the footage. Marissa thanked him and asked him not to send it to anyone except police or the contact she would provide. "Do not post it," she said. "Do not warn them. Do not call around the neighborhood asking questions yet. Let them believe they are safe for a little while." Mr. Patel nodded quickly. Caleb looked at his mother. "Why?" Marissa looked down the street where the charger had vanished. "Because people who think they got away are careless with the next step." The words opened another door in Caleb's mind. His mother was not guessing. She was anticipating. A white van from Green Hollow arrived minutes later, and Dr. Ellis stepped out with a technician and a soft support board. They moved Ranger carefully, following Marissa's instructions without argument. Dr. Ellis had worked with Marissa long enough to know when not to ask questions in front of a child. Ranger was lifted gently, Caleb walking beside him with one hand near his head, whispering about the blue blanket again. As they loaded Ranger into the van, Marissa stayed behind for 10 more seconds. She photographed the tire marks, the fabric, the shoe print, and the alley entrance. Then she looked up at the grocery camera and the far doorbell camera across the lane. Her eyes did not show rage. Rage was too loud. What moved through her face was colder and more useful, recognition of a trail. At the clinic, Ranger was taken into exam room 2. Caleb sat in a chair with his hands locked together while Marissa stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. She watched Dr. Ellis examine Ranger, listened to the findings, and asked for each observation to be written clearly: no severe trauma visible, soft tissue injury suspected, harness displacement consistent with sudden leash force and slip on wet surface, dog responsive and stable, follow-up imaging recommended. Caleb heard the words and realized his mother was not just trying to help Ranger heal. She was making sure nobody could later say it had been nothing. After the exam, while Ranger rested on a padded mat, Marissa stepped into the clinic storage office and opened a secure contact on her phone that Caleb had never seen. The name was simple: Laura Kim. She stared at it for a moment before pressing call. When the woman answered, her voice was alert before Marissa spoke. Turner. Caleb, standing just outside the cracked office door, heard the name said differently. Not like a friend. Like a call sign someone had not used in years. Marissa looked through the glass at Ranger and Caleb. I need guidance on a juvenile intimidation incident. Involving a retired K-9, video evidence, possible repeat offenders, and a clean scent trail. Laura Kim was silent for half a second. Are you safe? For now. Is the dog alive? Stable. Is this connected to your old work? Marissa's face did not change. No. It is connected to my son. That answer was enough. Laura's voice lowered. Preserve everything. Do not confront. Send me timestamps, GPS data, vet report, and any video. I will check local intimidation patterns. Marissa closed her eyes briefly, not from weakness, but from the cost of opening a door she had kept shut for years. Laura, I do not want attention. You never did, Laura said. That did not stop you from being the best handler we had. Marissa looked toward the door and saw Caleb standing there, eyes wide. She ended the call gently. I heard a little, Caleb admitted. Marissa stepped out of the office and knelt in front of him. You heard enough to have questions. Were you a police officer? No, Army. Not exactly. Then what were you? Marissa looked over at Ranger, asleep now but breathing easier. Someone who trained dogs for people who could not afford mistakes. Caleb waited, but she did not say more. Not yet. The answer was not the point of the day. Ranger was the point. Caleb was the point. The trail was the point. She touched his cheek with the back of her fingers. What matters now is that we do this right. We do not chase them. We do not threaten them. We do not become careless because they were cruel. Caleb whispered, but they laughed at him. Marissa's eyes softened, and for the first time, pain showed through the control. I know. They said nobody could prove anything. Her hand lowered to his shoulder, steady and warm. Then we will let the proof speak. Later, when they brought Ranger home with medication instructions and a support wrap, Marissa carried him inside with help from Dr. Ellis's technician while Caleb opened doors and moved pillows. Ranger rested on the blue blanket in the living room, exactly as promised. Marissa checked the GPS collar log on her laptop. The distress ping showed the exact time Ranger's movement pattern changed. The map traced the alley location, then the route to the clinic. She downloaded it, saved a backup, and labeled it with the date. She opened a drawer and removed the old silver coin with the paw print over a compass. Caleb saw it in her palm. Is that from before? She nodded once. From before. Does it mean you can find them? Marissa closed her fingers around the coin, then set it beside the laptop. It means I was taught not to lose a trail just because someone thinks the dark belongs to them. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening. Somewhere across town, Derek and his crew were probably laughing at the video, believing they had made a boy smaller and a dog weaker. Inside the Turner home, Ranger slept, Caleb sat beside him, and Marissa watched the first evidence files upload to a secure folder. She had not revealed everything. She had not opened the locked trunk. She had not told Caleb about the deserts, ports, border roads, collapsed buildings, missing handlers, or dogs that could track one scent through chaos and come back on command. But the quiet life Derek had mistaken for weakness was already shifting. Marissa Turner was still a mother first. That was why she was calm. That was why she was careful. And that was why the men who had left laughing had no idea how precisely they were already being followed. Marissa Turner built the case at her kitchen table while Ranger slept on the blue blanket and Caleb sat beside him with one hand resting lightly near the dog's shoulder. The house was quiet, but it was not helpless. A small desk lamp lit the laptop, the GPS collar log, Dr. Ellis's veterinary report, Caleb's written statement, and 4 labeled folders Marissa had made from plain manila envelopes. She did not use dramatic words on the labels. She used facts, location, video, medical, witness. That was how truth survived people who tried to bend it. Ranger's collar data came first. The GPS record showed his normal walking pace from the Turner home to the grocery store, then a sudden stop behind Patel's grocery at 3:47 in the afternoon, then irregular movement and a distress alert at 3:49. Marissa downloaded the raw file, saved a copy to an external drive, emailed a protected copy to herself, and forwarded one to Agent Laura Kim with the subject line, Turner Incident, K9 Collar Log, Original File. Caleb watched her work with wide eyes. Why so many copies? Marissa did not look away from the screen. Because people who lie like missing pieces. We do not give them missing pieces. Next came the veterinary report. Dr. Ellis had written it carefully. Ranger was responsive and stable, injury consistent with leash force and sudden loss of balance on wet concrete, no sign of natural collapse, follow-up required. It did not exaggerate. It did not soften. That mattered. Marissa placed the printed report into the medical folder and scanned it into the secure file. Caleb whispered, "It says he was hurt because of what they did." Marissa nodded. "It says what the evidence supports." Is that enough? Not alone. But cases are not built from one brick. Mr. Patel sent the grocery camera footage at 7:12 that evening. He included a message that read, "I am sorry I waited. I should have done more." Marissa read it twice, then replied, "You preserved the truth. That matters now." The video was grainy but clear enough. It showed Caleb entering the alley with Ranger, Derek stepping out, Troy holding up his phone, Luis near the wall, Kenny moving behind Caleb, the backpack sliding across the concrete, Derek reaching toward the leash, Ranger losing balance, and the crew leaving toward the charger. There was no sound, but the timing matched the caller alert. Marissa exported the file with the original timestamp intact and saved a second copy without changing the metadata. Then she called Mr. Patel. "Do not edit this. Do not post it. Do not send it around the neighborhood." His voice was shaken. "I understand. If anyone asks, you have already provided it to the family and will provide it to law enforcement. Will they come back?" "That is possible," Marissa said. She never lied to make people feel safe. "If they do, do not confront them. Let your camera work." Mr. Patel was silent for a moment. "You sound like you have done this before." Marissa looked at Ranger sleeping on the blanket. "I have learned that fear makes people chase. Evidence makes people answer." After she hung up, Agent Laura Kim called back on a secure number. Caleb could only hear Marissa's side of the conversation, but even that made the room feel different. "Caller log is uploaded. Vet report is uploaded. Grocery footage is original source. Child statement pending adult review. Possible suspects, Derek Malloy, Troy Vance, Luis Ortega, Kenny Blake. Vehicle, black Dodge Charger, partial plate reflected in puddle, likely Maryland tag. Prior neighborhood intimidation reports may connect. She listened, then wrote quickly. Yes, Troy records everything. If he posts it, preserve the platform link before it disappears. Caleb looked at her. They might post it. Marissa covered the phone and answered softly, people who laugh at harm often want an audience. Then she uncovered the phone. Laura, pull public posts if you can lawfully monitor. I will not access anything private. Only open source. Laura's voice was faint through the speaker now. Already checking. Marissa ended the call and opened her own phone only to the neighborhood group chat. She did not accuse anyone by name. She wrote a careful message. Caleb and Ranger were involved in an incident behind Patel's grocery this afternoon. Ranger is stable and under veterinary care. If you have camera footage from 3:40 to 4 o'clock near the alley, please preserve it and contact me directly. Do not post or confront anyone. Within minutes, messages appeared. Mrs. Henson from the corner had doorbell footage of the charger pulling away. A teenager named Brianna had heard voices while waiting at the bus stop and had seen Troy filming. A delivery driver remembered a black Charger parked partly in the alley and had dashcam footage from his van. An older man from the apartment building said he had stopped reporting Derek's crew because nothing ever stuck, but he would speak if someone could protect his name until the police needed it. Marissa answered each person with the same calm instruction: save original file, note time, do not edit, do not confront. Caleb watched his mother become something he had never seen fully, not louder, not harder, but larger in the room. She was still wearing the sweater she had put on after work. Her hair was still pulled back in the same simple way. But her eyes had become a map. At 8:03, Laura Kim sent a link. Troy had posted a short video clip with laughing emojis and a caption about the old dog on the block. He had cut the clip to make Caleb look frightened and Derek look dominant, but he had left in enough truth to harm himself. His own voice was clear. Derek's face was clear. Luis's jacket sleeve, torn near the cuff, was visible. The charger appeared in the background for 1 second. Caleb's voice could be heard saying, "Please do not touch him." Ranger could be seen standing between the boy and Derek before the camera jerked. Marissa did not let Caleb watch the whole thing. You do not need to carry their version in your head. She forwarded the link to Laura, then used a screen recording tool to preserve the public post exactly as it appeared, including the username, time, caption, comments, and view count. Comments from Derek's friends came in fast, mocking Caleb, mocking Ranger, daring anyone to report it. One comment from Kenny read, "Nobody proves anything." Marissa saved that too. They are writing the case themselves, she said quietly. Caleb looked angry now, not reckless, but hurt. How can they laugh at him? Marissa reached across the table and touched his hand. Because they think pain is power when it belongs to someone else. What if people believe them? Then we answer with the full record. By 8:40, the kitchen table held more than a family's pain. It held a timeline. 3:42, Caleb and Ranger leave home, captured by Turner porch camera. 3:46, delivery dashcam shows black Charger near alley. 3:47, grocery CCTV shows Derek's crew blocking path. 3:49, Ranger GPS distress alert. 3:50, Troy's phone video captures faces, voices, and contact with leash. 3:52, Mrs. Henson doorbell captures Charger leaving. 4:03, Marissa arrives, photographed evidence before movement. 4:21, veterinary intake. 5:06, written medical findings. 8:03, Troy publicly posts edited video. Every point had a source. Every source had a backup. Every backup had a timestamp. Marissa placed the torn gray fabric into a paper evidence bag. After photographing it in place with Mr. Patel present as witness. She did not use plastic because damp fabric could change inside it. Caleb noticed that detail too. How do you know that? She sealed the bag and wrote the date across the fold. Old habits. From the dogs you trained? She paused. From the people who taught me how not to waste what a dog finds. Later that night, Laura called again. Her voice was more serious. Derek Malloy's name appears in 6 local reports connected to intimidation, damaged cameras, and package theft. None moved forward because witnesses backed out or footage was incomplete. Troy Vance has multiple public videos near those locations. Luis Ortega's vehicle association matches a partial plate from 2 reports. Kenny Blake is younger, but his account comments on several posts. Marissa stood by the window, looking at the quiet street. Can this become a task force matter? If tonight escalates or if the intimidation pattern connects across jurisdictions, yes. For now, I can advise and coordinate with local detectives. But Marissa, be careful. Men like this often come back when they realize someone is building a case. Marissa looked toward the living room where Caleb had fallen asleep beside Ranger, his hand still near the blanket. Then we let them come back to cameras, not to fear. Before bed, she checked every camera on the house, porch, driveway, side gate, backyard. She did not aim them like traps. She aimed them like witnesses. She changed the memory cards, verified cloud backup, and tested the doorbell microphone. Then she opened the locked gray trunk in the garage for the first time in years. Inside were no weapons, no trophies, nothing meant to make a child afraid. There were old K-9 training patches with removed insignias, a leather lead, field notebooks, scent articles sealed in metal tins, a whistle set, and a faded photograph of Marissa standing with 3 war dogs under a sun-bleached sky. She took only one thing, a worn canvas pouch labeled Track Discipline. Caleb appeared in the doorway, half awake. Mom. She closed the trunk gently. Go back inside, baby. Are you going after them? Marissa shook her head. No. We are not chasing anger. Then what are we doing? She held up the canvas pouch. We are making sure truth has a clean path. At 10:18, another piece arrived. Brianna's mother sent a short video from across the street showing Derek at the charger after the incident, laughing while Troy pointed the phone at him. The audio was faint, but Derek's voice carried one sentence clearly: tell your mom if she wants to talk, she knows where the car wash is. Marissa saved it, labeled it threat reference, and sent it to Laura. Laura responded within 1 minute, that gives us future contact risk. Preserve home cameras tonight. Marissa looked at the dark window. She could almost feel the shape of Derek's arrogance moving somewhere beyond the block. He had left a trail, then posted it, then invited the mother of the boy he harmed to find him. He thought that was intimidation. To Marissa, it was a door opening. She returned to the living room and sat beside Ranger. The old K-9 lifted his head when she entered. She gave one soft whistle, and he focused. Not fully ready, not healed, but present. Rest, she whispered. You have done enough for tonight. Ranger lowered his head again. Caleb stirred on the couch. Do we have proof? Marissa looked at the folders, the phone, the laptop, the saved videos, the reports, the messages from neighbors who were finally choosing not to look away. Yes, she said. And more important, we have the truth from more than one place. Caleb's eyes closed again. Outside, the neighborhood looked quiet. But under that quiet, cameras were saving, witnesses were deciding, old reports were reopening, and a former handler was building a chain strong enough to hold men who believed nobody could prove anything. Derek and his crew did not know they were being recorded by the very fear they thought they controlled. They did not know their jokes, their car, their phones, their footsteps, their fabric, their shoes, and their own public posts were joining one another in a file. They thought the alley had ended when they drove away laughing. Marissa knew the alley had only begun speaking. At 10:43 that night, the block outside the Turner house. Looked quiet enough to fool anyone who did not understand the sound of a neighborhood holding its breath. Caleb was asleep on the living room couch with one hand still near Ranger's blue blanket, and Ranger rested on the floor beside him, his injured leg supported, his breathing steady after the medication from Dr. Ellis. Marissa Turner sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open, watching the final video files upload to the secure folder Laura Kim had created. The porch camera showed an empty sidewalk. The driveway camera showed her parked car. The side gate camera showed the narrow strip between her house and Mrs. Henson's fence. The doorbell camera had a clean view of the front steps, the street, and the curb where no one should have been stopping at that hour. Marissa did not expect peace from men who had used laughter to hide fear. She had seen enough patterns in her life to know that bullies often returned when silence failed them. They came back not because they were brave, but because proof frightened them more than people did. At 10:51, Ranger lifted his head before any camera alert sounded. His ears moved toward the front of the house. Marissa saw it from the kitchen and closed the laptop halfway, not in panic, but in preparation. "Stay," she whispered, one soft word meant for both the dog and the sleeping boy. Ranger obeyed, though his eyes remained fixed on the door. 3 seconds later, her phone vibrated with a motion alert. A vehicle had turned onto the block without headlights for the first few yards, then the lights flicked on low. The porch camera caught the black Dodge Charger rolling slowly past Mrs. Henson's house. Marissa watched the screen. The partial plate matched the reflection Caleb had described from the puddle. Derek Malloy was not smart enough to stay away, and his arrogance had brought him straight into the cleanest camera angle on the street. Marissa stood, walked to the hallway, and gently closed the living room door so Caleb would not wake to the first sound. Then she pressed one button on her phone, sending a silent alert to Laura Kim, subject vehicle in front of residence. Cameras active. No confrontation planned. Laura responded almost immediately, stay inside if possible. Task force unit nearby. Preserve audio. Marissa looked through the small front window beside the curtain. Derek stepped out of the Charger first, wearing the same jacket from the alley. Troy climbed out with his phone again, because he had learned nothing. Louise stayed near the passenger door, restless, and Kenny looked up and down the street as if darkness could erase a doorbell camera glowing red 6 feet away from him. Derek walked toward the porch with the confidence of someone who believed fear would open the door before he knocked. He did not know Mrs. Henson's new camera was recording from the left. He did not know Mr. Patel had already forwarded the grocery footage. He did not know a delivery driver's dashcam, a GPS caller log, and his own public video were waiting in a secure folder. Most of all, he did not know that Marissa had positioned the porch light so it illuminated faces without blinding the camera. Derek looked straight at the doorbell and smirked. "Hey, Caleb's mom," he called, loud enough for the microphone to catch every word. "We just came to talk." Marissa did not answer from behind the door. She turned on the porch speaker from her phone so the audio would record clearly from both ends. Derek waited, then laughed. "Quiet lady, still quiet." Troy lifted his phone and recorded the front door. "Tell her to bring the old dog out." Ranger gave a low sound from the living room, but it was not fear. It was recognition. Caleb stirred behind the closed door, and Marissa stepped quickly into the room, placing one hand gently on his shoulder before his eyes opened fully. "Stay behind me," she said softly. "Do not go to the window." Caleb blinked, confused, then heard Derek's voice outside and went pale. "Mom. I know. Is Ranger safe?" "Ranger is safe because you are going to stay calm for him." That steadied Caleb more than any promise could have. Marissa returned to the entryway and opened the interior door but kept the storm door locked between her and the porch. She did not step outside at first. She stood framed by the hallway light, one hand resting low by her side, the other holding her phone where the recording screen was visible. Derek grinned when he saw her. "There she is." Marissa's voice was even. "You are on private property. Leave now. Luis laughed from the curb. She sounds official. Troy said, maybe she practiced that at the dog shelter. Derek leaned closer to the storm door. We heard you are asking around. Getting videos. Talking to people. Marissa did not deny it. I am preserving evidence. The word evidence made Kenny shift his weight. Derek noticed and raised his voice to cover it. Evidence of what? Your kid tripped, and the dog got old. That is what happened. From behind Marissa, Caleb whispered, that is a lie. Marissa did not turn. I know. Derek heard the boy and smiled wider. Caleb, you back there? You going to cry on camera again? Marissa's face did not change, but something in the air did. Do not speak to my son. Or what? Derek asked. Troy laughed, but the laugh came late. Marissa looked directly at the doorbell camera, then back at Derek. Leave now. You are being recorded from more than one angle. Your vehicle is visible. Your voices are clear. Anything you say or do here becomes part of the report. Derek rolled his eyes toward Troy's phone. You hear that? Report. Then he looked back at Marissa. Lady, nobody cares about your little report. You should. Why? Because your dog got a sore leg? Caleb flinched behind her, and Marissa lifted one hand slightly, signaling him to remain still. Her voice remained calm, but lower now. You injured a retired K-9, intimidated a child, posted edited video of it, and came to the child's home at night after being told evidence was preserved. This is your final warning. Leave. For 1 second, the porch was silent. Even Troy seemed to understand that Marissa had just laid out the situation more clearly than Derek could laugh away. But Derek had already come too far in front of his crew to turn around with dignity. So he chose the mistake that would finish him. He stepped down from the porch, turned toward the street as if performing for the whole block, and shouted, nobody can prove we did anything. That boy is scared, that dog is useless, and you are just a quiet mom trying to act like somebody. The sentence echoed under the porch roof and traveled into 3 microphones, Marissa's phone, the doorbell camera, and Mrs. Henson's camera across the street. Caleb's breathing shook behind the door. Ranger's head lifted higher from the blanket, but Marissa did not let either of them move. Derek walked back toward the charger, then stopped and pointed at the house. Drop it, or next time you will be picking up more than homework. The threat was vague enough that he thought it protected him, but clear enough that everyone listening understood it. Luis muttered, Derek, come on. That was captured too. Kenny looked toward the corner and froze. At the far end of the block, a dark SUV sat parked with its lights off, engine running. Derek did not notice yet. Marissa did. She had noticed it the moment the charger arrived. The task force unit Laura mentioned had held position, waiting for the line to be crossed. Now the line was no longer a line. It was a recorded threat at the home of a child witness. Marissa opened the storm door 1 inch, not enough to step out, only enough for her voice to carry without distortion. Derek Malloy, you need to leave this property now. Derek turned back, surprised to hear his full name. You been looking me up? You left your name everywhere. You do not know me. I know your vehicle. I know your crew. I know your shoes. I know the fabric Luis dropped in the alley. I know Troy's public post. I know the GPS timestamp from Ranger's collar. I know Mr. Patel's camera was working. I know Mrs. Henson's camera has your car. I know you just returned to threaten a child witness. Each sentence struck a different part of the crew. Luis looked down at his torn sleeve. Troy lowered his phone for the first time. Kenny whispered something Derek ignored. Derek's face hardened because he felt control slipping, and men like him often mistake losing control for being attacked. You think you are some kind of cop, he said. Marissa's eyes stayed on him. No, then stop talking like one. I am talking like a mother who knows how trails work. Derek laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Trails? You and that old dog going to sniff us out? Ranger gave one low sound from inside the house, and Derek pointed toward it. See? Still making noise. Caleb stepped into the hallway despite Marissa's instruction, tears in his eyes, anger and fear mixed together. Do not talk about Ranger. Marissa shifted slightly, placing herself between Caleb and the door without pushing him back. Derek saw the boy and smiled as if he had won something. There he is. How is your hero dog? Caleb's fists tightened at his sides, but he did not move past his mother. Marissa's voice came quiet and firm. Caleb, behind me. He obeyed. That obedience, just like Ranger's, irritated Derek again. Everybody in that house takes orders, huh? Marissa looked at him, and for the first time her calm showed its edge. Only from people worth trusting. Troy whispered, we should go. Derek snapped, shut up. The task force SUV's parking lights flickered once at the end of the block. Laura Kim was watching, but she still did not move in. Marissa understood why. The recording needed the return. The threat. The refusal after warning. The intimidation pattern. Derek was creating exactly what previous cases had lacked. He stepped back onto the porch again, put one hand near the storm door frame, and leaned close enough for the camera to capture his face in perfect light. Listen to me, quiet lady. Take down the posts, stop asking neighbors, and tell your kid to keep his mouth shut. If police come around, nobody saw anything. That is how this block works. The whole neighborhood seemed to hold still. In 3 sentences, Derek had turned bullying into witness intimidation. He had named the pressure. He had confirmed the pattern. He had said the truth out loud because he believed the door between him and Marissa was also the edge of her power. Marissa's expression did not change. She looked at the red ring around the doorbell camera, then at Troy's phone, then at Derek's face. Thank you, she said. Derek blinked. For what? For making it clear. That was when the dark SUV at the end of the block turned on its headlights. Another vehicle rolled slowly from the opposite corner, unmarked but unmistakably. Official in the way it blocked the exit without rushing. Derek looked over his shoulder. Troy muttered, what is that? Louise stepped away from the Charger. Kenny stopped smiling entirely. Marissa did not step out. She did not point. She did not celebrate. She simply closed the storm door again, leaving the lock between her family and the men who had just condemned themselves on camera. Derek tried to recover with volume. We were leaving anyway. Marissa spoke through the speaker now, her voice calm and clear. Then leave before you add another charge. Charge? Derek scoffed, but his eyes kept moving to the vehicles. Lady, you are crazy. No, Marissa said. I am careful. The word landed differently from her mouth. Careful did not mean afraid. It meant prepared. Derek backed down from the porch, looking at Troy. Get in the car. Troy did not move fast enough. Derek, my phone is still live. Turn it off. It has been recording the whole time. Derek stared at him. The porch camera caught that too. Caleb stood behind Marissa, watching the moment the men who had laughed at proof realized they had made more of it. Ranger, still resting on the blue blanket, lowered his head again as if the house no longer needed him to stand. His job had been to protect Caleb in the alley. Tonight, the cameras had taken over. The Charger doors opened, but before Derek could get in, a firm voice came from the sidewalk. Derek Malloy, stay where you are. Agent Laura Kim stepped into the porch light from the direction of the unmarked SUV, accompanied by 2 local task force officers. She did not draw drama into the moment. She brought procedure. Derek froze, half inside the open car door. "Who are you?" Laura looked past him to Marissa for one brief second, and in that glance there was recognition older than this neighborhood, older than the case now forming on the block. "Someone who told Ms. Turner not to confront you," Laura said. "And someone who watched you come to a child's home and threaten a witness." Derek looked at Marissa again, but the easy smile was gone. "Ms. Turner," he repeated, as if the name had changed shape. Marissa opened the front door just enough to stand visible again, Caleb behind her, Ranger safe inside. She did not look like revenge. She looked like control. "I warned you to leave," she said. Derek's eyes moved from her to Laura, then to the cameras, then to Troy's phone, then to the officers blocking the charger. For the first time since he had stepped into the alley that afternoon, he seemed to understand that fear was not the only thing that could own a block. Records could. Witnesses could. A mother could. The night had given him every chance to walk away before crossing the final line. Instead, he had returned, threatened a child, confirmed the pattern, and said the quiet part into 3 microphones. After that, there was nothing left to excuse, soften, or misunderstand. The neighborhood did not need to wonder whether Derek Malloy could be forgiven as a bully who went too far. Everyone watching through curtains, cameras, and open doors had seen him choose intimidation after being warned. He had come back to make Caleb feel unsafe in his own home. He had come back to make Ranger's pain a joke. He had come back to make a mother afraid. But Marissa Turner had never been afraid in the way Derek understood. She had been waiting for him to leave a trail that even he could not laugh away. For a few seconds, the whole street seemed to forget how to move. Derek Malloy stood beside the open door of the black Charger, one hand still gripping the frame, his mouth half open as Agent Laura Kim stepped fully into the porch light with 2 task force officers behind her. Troy's phone remained in his hand, still recording because fear had made him forget the screen. Luis looked down at his torn sleeve as if the fabric itself had betrayed him. Kenny stared at the 2 vehicles blocking both ends of the street and finally understood that the block he thought belonged to fear had quietly filled with witnesses. But Derek was not ready to surrender the only identity he had built. He forced a laugh and lifted his chin. "You got all this for a dog?" Laura Kim did not react to the insult. She looked at him with the calm of someone who had interviewed men more dangerous than he was and less impressed by themselves. "For a child witness, a retired K-9, a documented intimidation pattern, and your decision to come here after the first incident." Derek scoffed. "Documented by who?" Laura's eyes moved to the red ring glowing on the Turner doorbell camera, then to Mrs. Henson's porch camera across the street, then to Troy's phone. "By you, mostly." Troy's face changed first. "Not fully. Just enough for his hand to lower a few inches." Derek turned on him. "Turn that off." Laura said, "Do not delete anything." Troy froze. "I did not do nothing." "Then you will want the original file preserved," Laura said. The quiet logic of it made Troy look even more afraid. Derek took one step away from the Charger, trying to reclaim the moment with volume. "This is crazy. We came to talk. She is the one making it something." Marissa Turner stood behind the storm door with Caleb just behind her shoulder and Ranger resting inside on the blue blanket. Her face was steady, but her eyes held every detail. She had not needed to chase Derek. She had let his own confidence walk him back into the record. Laura looked toward the house, and her voice changed slightly, not warmer exactly, but more respectful. "Ms. Turner, is Caleb safe inside?" Marissa answered, "Yes." "Is Ranger stable?" "Stable. Resting." Laura nodded once. That simple exchange made Derek look at Marissa differently. Not with understanding yet, but with irritation at the respect in Laura's voice. "Ms. Turner," he repeated, mocking the formality. "Everybody acting like she is somebody." Laura turned back to him. "She is." The words were soft, but they shifted the street. Curtains moved in nearby windows. Mr. Patel stood on his porch 2 houses down, holding his phone at his side. Mrs. Henson opened her door but stayed behind the screen. The task force officers did not rush. They allowed the silence to do what silence does when truth is coming, make liars hear themselves. Derek laughed again, but it was emptier now. What, she some dog trainer? Laura looked at Marissa, and for one moment the 2 women seemed to be standing in 2 timelines at once, this quiet Maryland street and some older place Caleb had never seen, where commands had to be exact and dogs had to trust handlers with their lives. Before she worked at Green Hollow, Laura said, Miss Turner trained K-9 units for a federal special operations program. Troy whispered, federal? Louise looked up sharply. Derek's eyes narrowed. You are lying. Laura did not argue. She reached into her jacket and removed a slim folder, not opening it wide enough for private details, but enough to show an official seal, a redacted service record, and an old photograph clipped to the inside. In the photograph, younger Marissa stood in field gear beside 3 powerful working dogs, her hand resting on one dog's vest, her expression the same calm Caleb knew from the kitchen table. The insignias were blurred, the agency name removed, but the respect in the image was unmistakable. Derek stared at it, then at Marissa, then at Ranger visible through the doorway. That does not mean anything, he said, but his voice had changed. Laura put the folder away. It means you chose the wrong woman to underestimate. Marissa stepped onto the porch now, keeping the storm door open behind her so Caleb stayed inside and safe. She did not come down the steps. She did not need to. Ranger lifted his head from the blanket, ears forward. Marissa gave one quiet command, a word Caleb had never heard her use before, low and clipped, not English in the ordinary way, more like a sound shaped by years of discipline. Ranger's eyes fixed on her instantly. Even injured, he became still in a way that made everyone on the street notice. Derek's face tightened. What is that supposed to prove? Marissa looked at him. That training remembers. Laura nodded to one of the task force officers, who brought a sealed evidence pouch from the SUV. Inside was the gray fabric from the alley, collected and documented with Mr. Patel's witness statement. Laura held it near the porch without opening the chain of custody bag. Marissa did not touch it. She gave another soft command. Ranger, from inside the doorway, lifted his nose slightly. His breathing changed, focused and deliberate. Then his eyes moved, not to the bag alone, but across the yard toward Luis. Luis took half a step back before he could stop. Himself. The porch camera caught it. Laura saw it. Marissa saw it. Caleb saw it too, and his eyes widened because Ranger was not just reacting. He was recognizing. Laura spoke for the record. Retired K-9 showing sent interest consistent with previously collected fabric. No contact made. Observation only. Derek snapped, that is just a dog looking around. Marissa's voice stayed even. Ranger remembered what your friend left behind. Louise said, I told you that sleeve ripped. Derek turned on him. Shut up. Laura's eyes sharpened. That statement is noted. Luis realized too late that he had confirmed the fabric connection out loud. Troy's phone was still recording. One of the officer's body cameras, activated when they stepped onto the block, captured it as well. Derek's confidence began to drain in pieces. First the cameras. Then the federal folder. Then Ranger's response. Then Luis's own mouth. But the reveal was not finished, because Marissa had not built the case on mystique. She had built it on proof. Laura opened a tablet and showed Derek a clean timeline, each item labeled by source, Turner porch camera showing Caleb and Ranger leaving home, Patel grocery CCTV showing the alley encounter, Ranger GPS collar distress ping at the exact time of the injury, Dr. Ellis's veterinary report, Troy's public video with Derek's voice, Mrs. Henson's doorbell clip of the Charger, delivery dashcam with the same vehicle, Brianna's witness note, tonight's porch camera showing Derek returning, tonight's audio capturing the warning to drop the report, tonight's statement telling Caleb to keep quiet. Derek stared at the screen with the angry confusion of a man who had believed evidence was something other people failed to collect. "You cannot use all that," he said. Laura answered, "We already preserved it. That video was edited by Troy," Laura said. "The original file will show what came before and after." Troy looked at the ground. Derek pointed toward Marissa. "She set us up." Marissa finally stepped down one porch step, still calm, still not raising her voice. "No, Derek. You came to an alley. You came to my home. You spoke into cameras. You posted your own video. You told people nobody could prove anything. I only believed you enough to preserve the proof." The sentence landed hard because it gave him no enemy to blame except himself. Derek looked toward Caleb, perhaps searching for the frightened boy from the alley, but Caleb was no longer alone on wet concrete. He stood behind his mother, one hand resting gently on Ranger's back, watching the man who had mocked him now struggle against the quiet power of facts. Laura took one step closer to Derek. "The prior reports are being reopened. Package theft, camera tampering, intimidation complaints, and the incident at Patel's grocery are now part of a pattern review." Derek's face changed again. "Prior reports? Those were nothing." Mrs. Henson's voice came from behind her screen door. "They were not nothing." Everyone turned. The retired bus driver stood under her porch light, small but steady. "I stopped sitting outside because of you boys. That was not nothing." Mr. Patel stepped forward from his walkway. "My cameras were damaged twice. That was not nothing." Brianna's mother called from across the street, "My daughter saw what you did today. She will give a statement." One by one, the block Derek believed he owned began returning itself to the people who lived there. No one shouted. No one rushed him. They simply spoke, and each voice took back a little more ground. Derek looked around as if the houses themselves had turned against him. But they had not turned. They had been waiting for enough proof to stand safely. Laura nodded to the officers. "Derek Malloy, Troy Vance, Luis Ortega, and Kenny Blake, you are being detained pending investigation into intimidation, harassment, animal cruelty allegations, witness intimidation, and related prior incidents. You will have an opportunity to make statements with counsel present." Derek stepped back. "Animal cruelty? For that old dog?" Marissa's eyes did not leave him. "For Ranger." The use of the name mattered. Ranger was not an object in a report. He was the K9 who had placed himself between Caleb and fear. Derek looked toward the doorway and saw Ranger watching him, calm now, not because he was unhurt, but because his handler, his boy, and the truth were all in place. That was when Derek finally understood. The dog he mocked had remembered. The boy he scared had observed. The mother he dismissed had built a record. The agency contact he did not know existed had brought procedure. The neighborhood he thought was silent had become witnesses. His face lost its last trace of performance. Troy whispered, "Derek, what do we do?" Derek had no answer. Power had changed hands without anyone touching him, without anyone yelling over him, without anyone becoming what he wanted them to be. Marissa stood on the porch in the warm light, quiet as ever, but now everyone could see that her quiet had never meant empty. It had meant controlled. It had meant trained. It had meant she knew exactly when to speak, when to wait, and when to let the trail finish what cruelty had started. The consequences began on the sidewalk, not in a courtroom, because Derek Malloy had finally run out of places to hide the truth. Agent Laura Kim did not shout when she gave the order. She did not need to. The task force officers moved with calm procedure, separating Derek, Troy Vance, Luis Ortega, and Kenny Blake beside the black Charger while body cameras recorded the entire contact. Derek tried one last time to turn arrogance into control. "This is ridiculous," he said, looking toward the neighbors as if the block might still lower its eyes for him. "You are doing all this because of a dog?" Laura looked at him, then toward the Turner porch where Caleb stood behind Marissa and Ranger watched from the doorway. "No," she said. "We are doing this because you harmed a retired K-9, intimidated a child, returned to threaten a witness, and connected yourself to a pattern this neighborhood has been trying to report for months." The first officer secured Troy's phone in an evidence bag after preserving the active recording. Troy looked sick when he realized his own device, the same phone he had used to mock Caleb, now held the full audio of Derek's threats, Luis's admission about the torn sleeve, and the crew's return to the Turner home. Luis tried to explain that the fabric meant nothing, but Laura reminded him not to make statements without counsel. Kenny kept saying he was just there, but Mrs. Henson's doorbell footage, Patel's grocery camera, and the alley video showed him moving behind Caleb to block the path. One by one, their excuses became smaller than the record. The Charger was photographed where it sat, its plate matching the partial reflection from the puddle, the delivery dashcam, and the footage from Mrs. Henson's camera. Officers documented the vehicle without searching beyond legal limits until the proper authorization was obtained. No one rushed. No one improvised. That mattered to Marissa. She had seen cases weakened by anger, by shortcuts, by people trying to make justice dramatic instead of durable. This time, every piece was handled cleanly. The gray fabric from the alley remained sealed in its paper evidence bag, labeled with the date, time, location, and Mr. Patel's witness signature. The shoe print photographs were attached to the alley report. Ranger's GPS collar log showed the exact stop, distress alert, and irregular movement pattern. Dr. Ellis's veterinary report connected the injury to sudden leash force and a slip on wet concrete, without exaggeration and without emotional language. Troy's public post showed the crew's faces and voices. The original phone file showed more. The grocery CCTV showed the full alley position. The doorbell audio showed the nighttime threat. Laura's body camera captured Derek learning that Marissa was not just a quiet mother from the dog clinic, but a former federal K-9 trainer whose instincts had preserved the trail before he even knew a trail existed. By midnight, Derek and his crew were processed on charges and referrals that matched what the evidence could support: harassment, witness intimidation, cruelty-related allegations involving a retired K-9, interference with a minor, and review for connection to prior neighborhood intimidation reports. The older cases reopened fast because the fear around them finally had structure. Mr. Patel gave a formal statement about camera damage and repeated pressure near his store. Mrs. Henson gave a statement about being threatened into silence after installing her first doorbell camera. The delivery driver submitted dashcam footage from 2 separate days showing the Charger near package theft complaints. Brianna and her mother provided witness information from the bus stop, carefully protected so the teenager was not exposed publicly. Caleb's statement was taken gently, with Marissa present, by an officer trained to interview children without turning memory into another kind of burden. He told the truth once, slowly, just as his mother had taught him, where Ranger stopped, who stepped forward, who held the phone, what was said, what was dropped, how Ranger reacted, when he called home. No one asked him to be tougher than he was. No one made him defend his fear. The truth was enough. Derek's biggest mistake had always been thinking proof belonged only to the loudest person in the room. But proof had never needed to be loud. It needed timestamps, witnesses, original files, medical records, camera angles, preserved metadata, and people brave enough to stop letting fear speak for them. 2 days later, at a preliminary hearing, the prosecutor laid out the evidence chain in plain language. The judge saw the alley footage, the GPS timeline, the veterinary report, the public video, the nighttime doorbell recording, and the prior reports now connected by vehicle, location, behavior, and witness statements. Derek tried to look bored at first. He leaned back, jaw tight, pretending the courtroom was just another block he could stare down. But when Troy's own video played and Caleb's voice came through saying, "Please do not touch him," Derek's face changed. Not into remorse, not fully. Into recognition that his laughter had been preserved exactly as it was. When the doorbell audio played his threat outside the Turner home, even Troy looked at the floor. Luis stopped whispering to his attorney. Kenny's shoulders collapsed. The court issued strict no-contact orders protecting Caleb, Marissa, Ranger, Mr. Patel, Mrs. Henson, Brianna, and other witnesses. Derek and the crew were barred from the Turner block, Patel's grocery, and the abandoned car wash area while the case moved forward. Their phones were held under evidence procedures. Their public posts were archived. Their vehicle was linked to the ongoing review. The abandoned car wash where they had gathered for years was placed under extra patrol, and the property owner, embarrassed by the attention, finally authorized cleanup and camera installation. For the first time in a long time, the crew did not get to walk back to the corner and laugh about what nobody could prove. The block saw them leave in official vehicles, not as legends, not as men who owned fear, but as suspects facing the weight of their own choices. Caleb was not in court for every step. Marissa would not let the legal process consume his childhood. But she did tell him what he needed to know. Ranger's name was cleared from every lie Derek had tried to attach to him. The report stated that Ranger had remained controlled, protective, and non-aggressive during the alley incident. The report stated that Caleb had tried to de-escalate and leave. The report stated that the crew had created the confrontation, filmed it, mocked it, and returned later to intimidate the family. When Marissa read those lines aloud at the kitchen table, Caleb looked down at Ranger, who was resting with his support wrap and the blue blanket tucked under one paw. "So they know he was good?" Caleb asked. Marissa touched Ranger's head gently. "They know he was exactly who he has always been." That mattered more to Caleb than the charges. Ranger had protected him. Ranger had been blamed by men who wanted cruelty to sound like a joke. Now the official record said what Caleb already knew in his heart: Ranger had not caused the danger, he had stood between Caleb and it. Derek lost more than freedom that night. He lost the myth that kept people quiet. His name, once whispered with fear, became attached to documented complaints, court dates, and conditions he could not laugh away. Troy lost the phone that had made him feel powerful and watched his own recordings become evidence. Luis lost the ability to pretend the torn sleeve was nothing after his own words confirmed it. Kenny lost the safety of being just there when videos showed him helping close the path. The crew lost the abandoned car wash as a base, lost the silence of the neighbors, lost the benefit of missing footage, and lost the false comfort of believing that a black child, a retired K-9, and a quiet mother were easy targets. Marissa did not celebrate when the first official charges were filed. She did not post online. She did not give interviews. When a local reporter called Green Hollow asking about her past, she declined politely and returned to Ranger's rehab schedule. Justice, to her, was not making Derek famous. It was making sure Caleb could sleep without listening for tires outside the house. It was making sure Ranger could heal without Caleb feeling guilty. It was making sure Mr. Patel could take out the trash after dark, Mrs. Henson could sit on her porch, and other children could walk home without calculating which sidewalk fear had claimed. Agent Laura Kim visited the Turner home 1 week later with a folder of updates and a small smile she tried to hide when Ranger lifted his head at the sound of her step. "He still remembers me," Laura said. Marissa looked at Ranger. "He remembers everybody who matters." Laura handed Caleb a printed copy of the corrected incident summary, the version that said he had cooperated, called for help, and protected the scene by following instructions. "You did something very difficult," Laura told him. "You remembered facts while scared." Caleb looked at his mother. "She taught me." Laura nodded. "I know. She taught a lot of us." Marissa gave Laura a warning look, not harsh, just enough to keep old doors from opening too wide in front of Caleb. Laura respected it and said no more. The payoff did not erase the alley. It did not make Ranger's injury disappear overnight. It did not remove the memory of Derek laughing or Caleb kneeling on wet concrete with homework pages scattered around him. But it changed who carried the weight. Before, Caleb carried fear while Derek carried confidence. Afterward, Derek carried the record, the charges, the restrictions, the reopened cases, the witnesses, and the proof he had created with his own arrogance. Caleb carried Ranger's leash again, not yet down the old route, not yet alone, but with his shoulders a little less bowed. Marissa carried the same. Quiet she always had, but now the neighborhood understood it differently. Her silence had not been fear. It had been control. Her patience had not been weakness. It had been discipline. And the justice that followed was not karma falling from the sky. It was a mother, a dog, a boy, a community, and a clean chain of evidence finally making the truth impossible to ignore. The neighborhood did not heal all at once, because fear that has lived on a block for years does not disappear just because one crew is taken away. It leaves slowly, through porch lights turning on again, through children choosing the main sidewalk instead of crossing the street, through store owners opening back doors without checking over their shoulders first. In the weeks after Derek Malloy and his crew were charged, the people around Patel's grocery began to understand that the case had not been won by revenge. It had been won by preparation, witnesses, clean evidence, and a mother who refused to let panic write the story. Mr. Patel was the first to make a change. He replaced the old grocery camera with a new system that covered the front entrance, the back alley, the parking lot, and the sidewalk without invading anyone's home. He put a small sign near the register that said, "For community safety, this property preserves video evidence." The sign did not sound dramatic, but to the children who walked past after school, it meant the alley no longer belonged to silence. Mrs. Henson started sitting on her porch again in the late afternoon, not with fear hidden behind the curtains, but with a glass of iced tea and her doorbell camera angled properly toward the street. The delivery driver who had once been mocked for reporting missing packages helped neighbors set up a shared incident log, not a gossip page, but a careful record with dates, times, camera sources, and police report numbers. Agent Laura Kim advised local detectives on how to connect the reopened intimidation cases without overreaching, and for the first time, people who had backed away from statements felt protected enough to speak. The community center held a meeting on a Thursday evening, and more than 50 people came. Caleb sat beside Marissa near the back with Ranger resting carefully at his feet, his support wrap still on but his eyes bright again. Nobody treated Ranger like a symbol at first. They treated him like a neighbor who had been hurt while protecting a child. That mattered to Caleb. Mr. Patel apologized publicly for waiting behind the door before stepping out, and Marissa did not let shame swallow the room. She stood and said, "Fear teaches people to survive alone. Safety teaches people to act together." That sentence changed the meeting. People stopped talking only about Derek and began talking about what they would build now that he was not defining the block. A safe walk program was created for students coming home from the bus stop and school routes. Volunteers did not chase trouble or confront strangers, they simply stood in visible pairs at key times, watched corners, carried phones, and knew when to call for help. Green Hollow Animal Rehabilitation Center hosted a K-9 safety afternoon where Marissa taught children how to approach working dogs, retired dogs, nervous rescue dogs, and injured animals with respect. She explained that loyalty did not make a dog invincible, and love did not mean ignoring pain. Caleb helped demonstrate simple calm commands with Ranger once Dr. Ellis cleared him for short movement. When Ranger stood slowly and obeyed Caleb's soft voice, the room applauded, not loudly enough to startle him, but warmly enough for Caleb to smile for the first time without looking over his shoulder. The local police department also changed how it handled neighborhood intimidation reports. After Laura reviewed the old files with detectives, the department created a pattern review process for repeated low-level complaints that had previously been treated as isolated incidents. Damaged cameras, package theft, threats, loitering near children's routes, and witness hesitation were no longer dismissed as separate little problems when the same names, vehicles, locations, or videos appeared again and again. Officers were instructed to ask whether victims had camera footage they were afraid to share, whether witnesses needed protection from retaliation, and whether public social media posts might preserve parts of the incident. It was not perfect, and Marissa did not pretend it was. But it was better than telling frightened neighbors to call back when something worse happened. Caleb's school invited a counselor to speak with students about intimidation, reporting safely, and supporting classmates who are targeted. Caleb did not want to stand in front of everyone, so he did not. Marissa would not let his pain become a lesson for other people without his consent. Instead, his teacher read an anonymous note Caleb wrote. "I was scared, but I remembered what my mom told me. Fear can remember facts." The class went quiet when they heard it. Afterward, 2 students told the counselor about older kids who had been bothering them near the bus stop. The school adjusted its dismissal supervision, and the Safe Walk volunteers added that corner to their route. Caleb never knew exactly which kids spoke up, but he noticed fewer students walking home alone. Ranger's recovery became a rhythm the neighborhood could see. Short walks at first. Then the driveway. Then the corner. Then one careful lap to Patel's grocery, where Mr. Patel kept a bowl of fresh water near the door and a small sign that said Retired K-9 Welcome. Caleb still had hard moments. Sometimes a black car turning too slowly made his hand tighten around the leash. Sometimes laughter behind him made his shoulders rise. Marissa never told him to get over it. She taught him to breathe, look, name 5 facts, and let Ranger feel his calm return through the leash. Healing is not pretending it did not happen, she told him. Healing is learning that it does not own every step after. Marissa did not return to the life she had left behind, and she did not let people turn her into a neighborhood legend. When someone called her a hero, she corrected them gently. The witnesses were heroes. The cameras were tools. Ranger did his job. Caleb did his job. I did mine. But everyone understood that her quiet had changed the block. Not because she frightened people, but because she taught them how to stand without becoming reckless. Derek had wanted the neighborhood to remember what he could do. Instead, the neighborhood remembered what happened when people preserved evidence, protected children, and refused to let fear stay private. The old alley behind Patel's grocery was still an alley. The bricks were still worn, the pavement still cracked, the evening shadows still long. But now there was a working camera above the door, a light that came on before dark, and a community that no longer looked away as easily as before. The victory was not that Caleb and Ranger had been avenged. The victory was that the next child walking home would not have to be alone before anyone believed danger was real. A month after the night Derek Malloy came back to the Turner house, Caleb stood at the mouth of the old alley behind Patel's grocery with Ranger's leash in his hand and his mother beside him. The sun was low over the Maryland rooftops, turning the brick walls warm instead of cold, and the new light above the grocery back door clicked on before the shadows had a chance to take over the concrete. Ranger wore his repaired K-9 vest, the stitching fresh along one side, the name patch cleaned but still old enough to carry history. He walked slower than before, but he walked with his head up. Caleb noticed that first. Not the camera above the door. Not the new sign near Mr. Patel's back entrance. Not Mrs. Henson sitting on her porch half a block away with a glass of iced tea. He noticed Ranger's head up, and for the first time in weeks, his own shoulders relaxed. Marissa did not hurry him. She stood slightly behind her son, close enough to reach him, far enough to let him choose the step himself. "We do not have to go through," she said. Caleb looked down at Ranger. The dog's ears shifted toward him, waiting, trusting, as if the alley were just another path and not a memory. "I know," Caleb said. His voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "I think we should." Marissa nodded once. "Then we go at Ranger's pace." Caleb took one step, and Ranger took one with him. The leash stayed loose. That mattered. In the place where Caleb's homework had once scattered across wet concrete, there was only clean pavement now. Near the milk crates, the wall had been washed. The old Camera bracket had been replaced. Mr. Patel had painted the back door blue because, as he told Caleb, a door children passed every day should not look like a warning. When they reached the middle of the alley, Ranger paused and lowered his nose briefly. Caleb froze. Marissa saw it but did not speak too quickly. Ranger sniffed the ground, then lifted his head and looked back at Caleb, calm and steady. No fear. No pulling. No trembling. Just memory passing through and leaving again. Caleb let out a breath he had been holding for a month. Do you think he remembers? Marissa looked at Ranger with the respect she gave every working dog, retired or not. Yes. Caleb swallowed. Then why is he not scared? Marissa's eyes softened. He may be. Brave does not mean nothing hurts you. Brave means you still know where home is. Caleb looked toward the end of the alley, where the sidewalk opened toward their street. Was I brave? Marissa placed a hand on his shoulder. You were scared, and you told the truth anyway. That is one of the hardest kinds. Ranger nudged Caleb's knee, and Caleb gave a small laugh, the first one in that alley since the day everything changed. They continued walking. At the far end, Mr. Patel stepped out with a small paper bag. For later, he said, holding it up. Dog-safe biscuits. Dr. Ellis approved. Caleb smiled. Thank you, Mr. Patel. Mrs. Henson called from her porch, good to see you two walking again. A neighbor across the street lifted a hand. A boy from Caleb's school rode past slowly on his bike and said, Hey, Ranger. No one made a speech. No one turned the moment into a performance. That made it better. The block was not pretending the past had vanished. It was showing Caleb that the path belonged to him again. When they reached home, the porch light was already on. Marissa opened the door, and Ranger stepped inside first, as he always had, checking the room before turning back to Caleb. The blue blanket still lay near the couch, but Ranger did not go to it right away. He stood by the window, looking out at the street that no longer felt owned by men who laughed at fear. Caleb knelt beside him and adjusted the repaired vest. You did good, partner. Ranger pressed his head against Caleb's chest, and Caleb held him gently, not like a boy trying to keep from breaking, but like someone learning that healing could be held without being rushed. Marissa stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them. In her pocket was the old coated whistle, the one she had once used in places Caleb still did not fully know about. She touched it with her fingers, then left it there. Tonight, she did not need it. Tonight, Ranger did not need a command. Caleb did not need a warning. The house was quiet because it was safe, not because fear had made it silent. Later, as the sun disappeared and the first evening sounds moved through the neighborhood, Caleb asked, Mom, will things stay better? Marissa sat beside him on the porch while Ranger rested at their feet. Only if people keep choosing better, she said. Justice is not one day. It is what people protect after the day is over. Caleb thought about that, then looked down the street toward Patel's grocery, the new cameras, the porch lights, the neighbors who had stopped hiding behind curtains. Derek had tried to make him feel small. Instead, Caleb had learned that truth could have a team, courage could be quiet, and a dog's loyalty could wake up an entire block. Ranger lifted his head as the wind moved through the trees, and Caleb smiled. They had tried to break a boy's courage. Instead, they taught a neighborhood how to stand.